The words hit me like a slap across the face, right there in my own living room, honey. You're nothing but a useless old hag, Mom, and everybody knows it. My own son, Michael, said those words to me in front of his wife, Sarah, their 3 kids, my daughter, Lisa, and her husband, Tom.
Y'all, I felt all the air leave my lungs at once, and I had to grip the arm of my recliner just to stay steady. 68 years old, and this is how my firstborn talks to his mama? I'm Dorothy, by the way, and I've been living here in Nashville, Tennessee my whole life. Raised 2 kids as a single mother after their daddy died in a construction accident when Michael was 12 and Lisa was 9. Worked double shifts at Vanderbilt Hospital for 35 years as a nurse. Came home bone tired every single night, but always made sure those children had everything they needed. Clean clothes, hot meals, help with homework, and more love than they knew what to do with. But standing there in my living room last Sunday, watching Michael's face twist up with pure disgust while he called me useless, I realized something had gone terribly wrong somewhere along the way. The silence stretched between us like a canyon, and I could feel my shoulders just drop like I was carrying the world. My daughter Lisa looked down at her hands, too embarrassed to meet my eyes, while Sarah, Michael's wife, had this satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth like she'd been waiting years to see this moment. You know what started this whole ugly scene? I'd asked Michael if he could help me move some boxes up to the attic, just some old Christmas decorations and photo albums that were getting in the way down in the basement. Nothing heavy, nothing urgent, just a favor from a son to his mama. But Michael exploded like I'd asked him to build me a mansion with his bare hands. Jesus Christ, Mom, I work 60 hours a week. Can't you see I'm trying to relax? This is exactly what I mean. You're always asking for something, always needing something, always being such a burden on everyone. Honey, I let out the longest breath you ever heard and tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be a burden, that I just thought maybe while he was here visiting, we could knock it out together. But that's when Sarah chimed in with her poison tongue. Dorothy, you have to understand that Michael has his own family to think about now. We can't always be running over here to fix your problems. The way she said your problems made it sound like I was some kind of charity case instead of the woman who'd helped them with their down payment, babysat their kids every weekend for 5 years, and loaned them money more times than I could count. But it was what happened next that really broke my heart into a million pieces. My grandson Tyler, Michael's oldest boy who just turned 16, looked at me and shook his head like I was pathetic. Grandma, why can't you just hire somebody? You're always making drama about everything. This child I'd rocked to sleep as a baby, taught to ride a bike, helped with his homework for years, talking to me like I was some stranger off the street. That's when Michael really let it have me. She can't hire anybody because she spends all her money on stupid stuff and then expects us to bail her out. Look around this house, Mom. It's falling apart because you won't spend a dime on maintenance, but God forbid we don't come running every time you need something moved or fixed or cleaned. You're 68 years old. Act like it. Stop being such a useless old hag and handle your own life. Y'all, I felt those tears starting to sting, but I was not about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I stood up as straight as I could and said in the calmest voice I could manage, I think it's time for everyone to go home. But Michael wasn't done. Oh no, he was just getting warmed up. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of listening to some honest advice, you're going to pout like a child and kick us out. This is why nobody wants to be around you anymore, Mom. You're exhausting. Lisa finally found her voice and mumbled something about how maybe we should all calm down, but the damage was done. As they gathered their things and headed for the door, I heard Sarah whisper to Lisa, maybe now she'll get the hint that she can't keep depending on everyone else to take care of her. The front door slammed, and suddenly my house felt bigger and emptier than it ever had before. I walked over to my kitchen window and watched their cars pull out of my driveway. And sweetie, I couldn't help but let out this bitter little laugh because what none of them knew, what they never bothered to ask about or pay attention to, was that your useless old hag had been very busy these past few months. Very busy indeed. Before I tell you what I'd been up to, and honey, this part is going to absolutely shock you. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. Speaking of which, what state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me, have you ever had family treat you like you didn't matter? Because your stories help me know I'm not alone in this crazy world. Now, let me tell you what I discovered next, because what they did was about to backfire in the most beautiful way. You see, about 6 months ago, I started noticing some strange things happening with my finances. Little things at first. My checking account balance seemed lower than it should be. There were charges on my credit card I didn't remember making, and my Social Security deposits weren't lasting as long as they used to. Now, I've been managing my own money since I was 18 years old, and I know every penny that comes in and goes out. So when things stopped adding up, I knew something was wrong. At first, I thought maybe I was starting to lose my mind a little bit. You know how people talk about older folks getting confused about money and bills? I even made an appointment with my doctor to check if I was having some kind of early dementia symptoms. But Dr. Peterson ran every test in the book and told me my mind was sharp as a tack. That's when I knew someone was messing with my finances on purpose. I decided to do a little detective work of my own. Started keeping copies of everything: bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, you name it. And honey, what I found made my blood run cold. There were ATM withdrawals from machines I'd never been to, credit card charges at restaurants I'd never eaten at, and even online purchases for things I wouldn't know how to buy if my life depended on it. But here's the thing that really caught my attention. Most of these suspicious transactions happened on days when Michael and Sarah had been to my house. Days when I'd left them alone in the kitchen while I went to use the bathroom or answer the phone. Days when Sarah offered to help me with my bills and said she'd organize my paperwork for me. Y'all, my voice caught with pure excitement when I realized what was happening. That sweet, helpful daughter-in-law of mine had been stealing from me right under my nose. The woman I'd welcomed into my family, helped with her children, trusted with my financial information, she'd been robbing me blind. But I didn't confront them right away. Oh no, sweetie, I'm not that kind of foolish. Instead, I did what any smart woman would do. I started setting traps. I opened a new checking account that they didn't know about and had my Social Security transferred there. I changed all my passwords and started keeping my important papers locked up. And then I waited to see what would happen. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, Michael called me in a panic. "Mom, did you forget to pay your electric bill? Sarah got a notice that your power's about to be shut off." Now, I knew good and well that my electric bill was paid through automatic withdrawal from my secret account, so this was just their way of fishing to see if I had money problems. "Oh my goodness," I said, playing along. "I must have forgotten. What am I going to do?" Sarah got on the phone all sweet and concerned. "Dorothy, don't you worry about a thing. We can't let you live without power. I'll just pay it online with your credit card. I still have the number from when I helped you order those groceries last month, remember?" Honey, the mischief was just dancing in my voice when I told her that would be wonderful. And I gave her the number to a prepaid card I'd loaded with exactly $50. When she called back an hour later saying the card wasn't working, I knew I had her dead to rights. "Oh, that's so strange," I said, innocent as a newborn baby. "Let me call the bank tomorrow and see what's wrong." But what I actually did was drive straight to the police station and file a report for credit card fraud and identity theft. Detective Morrison took my statement and all my evidence, and y'all, his eyes got bigger and bigger as he looked through everything I documented. Mrs. Henderson, he said, shaking his head, this is one of the most thorough fraud cases I've ever seen. You've got more evidence here than most of our trained investigators collect. He told me they'd start an official investigation, but these things take time, and I should be careful not to let the suspects know what I was up to. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands in a different way. I called my lawyer, Mr. Williams, who'd handled my husband's estate years ago and helped me with some property issues over the years. I need to make some changes to my will, I told him, and honey, you could hear the determination just vibrating in my voice. Some big changes. Now, let me back up and tell you what my original will looked like, because this is important for understanding why what happened next was so perfectly devastating. I'd always planned to leave everything split evenly between Michael and Lisa. My house, which was worth about $340,000, my savings accounts, my life insurance policy, my retirement accounts, everything 50-50 between my two children. It seemed fair and simple, and I'd always assumed they'd both take care of their kids with their inheritance. But sitting in Mr. Williams' office that Tuesday afternoon, I explained everything that had been happening. The theft, the disrespect, the way they treated me like a burden instead of their mother who'd sacrificed everything for them. Mr. Williams listened carefully, taking notes, and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Dorothy, I've been practicing family law for 35 years, and I've seen this story more times than I care to count. Adult children who think their aging parents are just obstacles standing between them and their inheritance." "So what can I do about it?" I asked him. And that's when he smiled this knowing little smile that told me he had some ideas. Well, the beauty of a will is that it's your money and your property until the day you die. You can change it however you want, as many times as you want, for any reason you want. And if certain people have shown you that they don't deserve your generosity, he let the sentence hang there, but I knew exactly what he meant. We spent 2 hours going through all my assets and debts, figuring out exactly what my estate was worth and how I wanted to redistribute it. And honey, by the time we were done, I had a plan that was going to knock their socks clean off. But the will was just the beginning of my revenge. Oh no, sweetie, I was just getting warmed up. The next step was dealing with the criminal charges. Detective Morrison called me about 2 weeks after I'd filed my report to let me know they'd completed their investigation. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, "we've got them dead to rights. Your daughter-in-law, Sarah, has been systematically stealing from you for the past 8 months. We found evidence of credit card fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized access to your banking accounts. The total amount stolen is just over $12,000. $12,000, y'all. $12,000 that I'd worked my whole life to save, that was supposed to help me through my retirement years, that was meant to leave something behind for my grandchildren. Gone. Because my son's wife decided she deserved my money more than I did." "What happens now?" I asked Detective Morrison, and he explained that they'd be arresting Sarah on multiple felony charges. "Mrs. Henderson, with the evidence you provided and what our investigation turned up, she's looking at probably 2 to 5 years in prison if she's convicted. And based on what we found, conviction is pretty much guaranteed." But here's where it gets interesting, honey. Detective Morrison told me that when they brought Sarah in for questioning, she immediately tried to throw Michael under the bus, claimed he was the mastermind behind the whole scheme, said he pressured her to steal from me because they needed money for their house payments and the kids' activities, said Michael told her I'd never notice because old people don't pay attention to their finances anyway. Whether that was true or not, I'll never know for sure, but it didn't matter to me at that point, because Michael had made his feelings about his useless old hag mother perfectly clear. Even if Sarah was the main culprit, he'd gone along with it, and he'd certainly shown me exactly how much respect he had for the woman who'd raised him. The day Sarah got arrested was a Tuesday morning. I know because I was sitting in my kitchen having my coffee and watching the birds at my feeder when I saw the police cars pull up to their house across town. Of course, I wasn't actually there to see it happen, but Lisa called me about an hour later, crying and carrying on about how the police had come to Michael's work and arrested Sarah right in front of all his coworkers. "Mom, what did you do?" Lisa asked me, like I was the villain in this story. "Michael says you had Sarah arrested for a misunderstanding about money. He's devastated. The kids are scared, and Sarah might go to prison. How could you do this to our family?" Y'all, I could feel those tears threatening to spill over, but not because I felt sorry for them. I was crying because my own daughter was taking their side even after everything they'd done to me. "Lisa, sweetie," I said, my voice breaking right in half, "Sarah stole over $12,000 from me. $12,000. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." But Lisa wasn't hearing it. "Mom, they have 3 kids. What are those children supposed to do if their mother goes to jail? How is Michael supposed to pay the bills by himself? You have more money than you need anyway. Couldn't you have just talked to them about it instead of getting the police involved?" That conversation told me everything I needed to know about where Lisa stood in all this. She wasn't upset that her brother's wife had stolen from her mother. She was upset that there were consequences for it. And that's when I knew my new will was exactly the right decision. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for about 3 weeks after Sarah's arrest. And honey, you can bet I was going to be there. I wanted to look that woman in the eye when she had to stand up in front of a judge and admit what she'd done to me. But the night before the hearing, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was Michael, and he was calling to grovel, sort of. "Mom," he said, and I could hear he'd been drinking, "this whole thing has gotten way out of hand. Sarah made a mistake, okay? She was stressed about money and she did something stupid, but you're about to destroy our entire family over it. Those are your grandchildren who are going to suffer if their mother goes to prison." I let him talk for a few minutes, curious to see if he would actually apologize for calling me a useless old hag, or if he would take any responsibility for what had happened. But instead, he just kept making excuses. Sarah was postpartum after their youngest. They were behind on their mortgage. The kids needed so many things for school. It was like he thought poverty was an excuse for theft. "Michael," I finally said, "do you remember what you called me the last time you were in my house?" There was a long pause, and then he said, "Mom, I was angry. You know I didn't mean it." "What did you call me, Michael?" I repeated, because I wanted to hear him say it. Another pause. I said some things I shouldn't have said." "You called me a useless old hag in front of your children and your sister," I told him, and the words came out sharper than I meant them to. "You told me to stop being a burden on everyone and handle my own life. Well, sweetie, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm handling it." "Mom, please, we can work this out as a family. We don't need lawyers and judges and all this drama. Just drop the charges and we'll pay you back every penny, I promise." Honey, my voice was dripping with all that irony when I asked him, "And where exactly are you going to get $12,000 to pay me back? The same place you got the money to steal from me in the first place?" That's when he really lost it. Started yelling about how vindictive I was being, how I was tearing the family apart out of spite, how his kids would never forgive me for putting their mother in jail. And you know what? He was probably right about that last part, but I had reached the point where I didn't care anymore. "Michael," I said, and my voice took on this knowing, satisfied quality. Your children are going to learn a very important lesson about actions and consequences, something you apparently never learned. He hung up on me, and that was the last time we spoke before everything hit the fan. The court hearing went exactly like Detective Morrison predicted. Sarah pled guilty to multiple felony charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation. The judge ordered her to pay full restitution plus court costs, and she had to surrender her passport so she couldn't leave the country. When they read those charges out loud in that courtroom, listing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen dollar, every lie she'd told, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Vindicated. Michael sat in the back row with Lisa and their kids, shooting daggers at me with his eyes like this was all my fault. But honey, I held my head up high and looked straight ahead. This was justice, plain and simple, and I wasn't about to feel guilty for demanding it. But the real fireworks were still to come, because nobody in that courtroom knew about the changes I made to my will. Now, I need to tell you something that might surprise you, y'all. Even after everything Michael and Sarah had done, even after the stealing and the name-calling and the complete disrespect, part of me still hoped maybe this whole experience would wake him up. Maybe having his wife go to prison would make him realize how badly he treated his mother. Maybe he'd come to me with a genuine apology and try to rebuild our relationship. So I waited. Sarah went to prison in November, and I waited through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through New Year's, waited for a phone call, a visit, a card, anything that showed Michael understood what had gone wrong and wanted to make it right. But the only time I heard from him was when he needed something. In December, he called to ask if I could babysit the kids while he worked extra shifts to cover Sarah's lost income. He said, "I know things have been complicated between us, Mom, but I'm really struggling here. The kids miss their grandmother and I could use the help." Y'all could hear the joy bubbling up in my voice when I told him I'd be happy to watch my grandchildren anytime. Not because I was eager to help Michael, Lord knows he didn't deserve it. But those babies hadn't done anything wrong, and they didn't need to suffer because their parents made bad choices. So I started watching Tyler, Madison, and little Emma after school and on the weekends when Michael had to work. And honey, those visits broke my heart over and over again. The kids were confused about why their mama wasn't coming home, scared about money, and caught in the middle of this whole ugly situation. Tyler especially seemed angry at the whole world and kept asking me why I'd sent his mom to jail. I tried to explain, in age-appropriate ways, that their mother had taken money that didn't belong to her and that there are consequences for breaking the law. But how do you tell a 16-year-old boy that his mother is a thief without completely destroying his image of her? How do you balance honesty with compassion when you're talking about your own family? The worst part was that Michael never once used those visits as an opportunity to talk to me about what had happened between us. He'd drop the kids off with barely a word, pick them up the same way, and treat me like I was nothing more than a free babysitter. Still no apology for calling me a useless old hag. Still no acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about a few things. In January, things got even more complicated. Sarah was up for early release for good behavior, which meant she'd be home by March instead of serving her full sentence. The day Michael found out, he called me with what I guess he thought was good news. He said, "Mom, Sarah's getting out early. The kids are so excited and we can finally start putting this whole nightmare behind us. I know she wants to apologize in person to you for everything that happened. But I wasn't interested in Sarah's apologies, honey. I was interested in Michael's." I said, That's nice, sweetie, but what about your apology? Your apology? Mom, I didn't steal anything from you. That was all Sarah's doing. No, Michael. Your apology for calling me a useless old hag. Your apology for treating me like garbage in front of your children. Your apology for 30 years of taking me for granted and expecting me to be grateful for the privilege. The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he said, Jesus, Mom, are you ever going to let that go? People say things when they're angry. I thought you were being dramatic then, and I think you're being dramatic now. That's when I knew without a shadow of a doubt that Michael was never going to change. He was never going to see me as anything more than an obligation he had to deal with. He was never going to respect me or appreciate what I'd done for him or treat me like his mother instead of his burden. And y'all, a little smile crept into my voice when I realized that was perfectly fine with me, because I had something planned that was going to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Sarah got out of prison in March, just like they'd predicted. I watched from my kitchen window as Michael brought her home, saw the neighbors peeking out of their curtains to get a look at the woman who'd gone to jail for stealing from her elderly mother-in-law. The whole neighborhood had heard about what happened, of course. In a place like Nashville, that kind of scandal spreads faster than wildfire. A week after Sarah came home, they called a family meeting. Lisa called to tell me about it, said Michael wanted everyone to get together at his house so Sarah could apologize and we could all move forward as a family. The audacity of that man, thinking he could schedule my forgiveness like a doctor's appointment. But I agreed to go because I was curious to see what Sarah's apology would sound like, and because I had news of my own to share. The meeting was on a Sunday afternoon, and when I walked into Michael's living room, it was like deja vu from that awful day months earlier when this all started. Same people, same seating arrangement, same tense atmosphere. Sarah looked thinner and older, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes when she started talking. "Dorothy," she said, her voice shaky and rehearsed, "I want to apologize from the bottom of my heart for what I did. I know there's no excuse for stealing from you, and I know I broke your trust in the worst possible way. I was in a bad place mentally, and I made terrible decisions, but that doesn't make it right. I've been in counseling in prison, and I understand now how much I hurt you. I'm prepared to pay back every penny, and I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." It was a decent apology, I'll give her that. Better than anything I'd gotten from Michael, certainly. She took responsibility, admitted wrongdoing, and seemed genuinely remorseful. If this had been a movie, that would have been the moment where I hugged her and said all was forgiven and we lived happily ever after. But this wasn't a movie, and I wasn't ready to pretend that a nice speech erased months of theft and betrayal. "Thank you for that, Sarah," I said calmly. "I appreciate you taking responsibility, but I have something I need to share with all of you, and I think today is the perfect time to do it." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder that contained copies of my new will and some other legal documents. Michael looked suspicious immediately. He could probably sense that whatever I was about to say wasn't going to be what he wanted to hear. As you all know, I'm 68 years old, and while I'm in good health now, I won't live forever. I've been thinking a lot lately about legacy, about what I want to leave behind, and about what kind of family I've raised. I paused to look around the room, making eye contact with each of them. and I've made some decisions about my will that I think you should know about." Lisa looked nervous, Sarah looked confused, and Michael looked downright angry. "Mom, if this is about the money Sarah took, we've already said we're going to pay it back. You don't need to threaten us with your will." "Oh, sweetie," and you could hear the mischief dancing in my tone. "This isn't a threat. It's an announcement." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. "This is my new will, executed last month and properly witnessed by Mr. Williams and his staff. Let me read you the relevant portions." The room got so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. Even the kids stopped fidgeting and stared at me. "I, Dorothy Mae Henderson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils and declare this to be my last will and testament." I looked up to make sure everyone was paying attention. They were. "To my son, Michael Henderson, and his wife, Sarah Henderson, who have shown me through their words and actions that they view me as nothing more than a burden and a source of money, I leave the sum of $1 each, plus this message. You called me a useless old hag, and perhaps you were right. But this useless old hag was smart enough to change her will." Y'all, Michael's face went white as a sheet. "Mom, you can't be serious." "Oh, but I am, honey. Let me continue." I turned the page. "To my daughter, Lisa Henderson Garcia, who chose to enable and defend theft rather than stand up for her mother, I leave the sum of $1, plus this message. Family loyalty should flow both ways." Lisa started crying, actual tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please, you can't do this to us. We're your children." "Yes, you are. And I've spent 30+ years proving that to you in every way I knew how, but apparently that wasn't enough." I turned to the next section. "The remainder of my estate, including my house, my savings, my life insurance, and all other assets, I leave in equal parts to the following organizations: the Nashville Humane Society, the Tennessee Children's Home, and the Alzheimer's Association of Tennessee." The silence that followed was deafening. You could see the math happening in Michael's head. He was realizing that instead of inheriting about $200,000, he was going to get $1 and the satisfaction of knowing he'd driven away the mother who'd sacrificed everything for him. But I wasn't done yet. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out another document. "This is a restraining order for Sarah Henderson, filed yesterday and approved by Judge Martinez. Sarah, you are hereby prohibited from coming within 500 feet of my home, my property, or my person. If you violate this order, you'll go back to prison." Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. "But Dorothy, I apologized. I said I was sorry." "You are sorry, sweetie. Sorry you got caught. But you see, I don't trust apologies anymore. I trust actions. And your actions taught me that I need to protect myself from people who think my money belongs to them." Michael exploded then, just like I knew he would. Started yelling about how vindictive and cruel I was being, how he was destroying the family out of spite, how his kids would suffer because of my selfishness. The same old Michael, blaming everyone else for the consequences of his choices. But this time, I didn't sit there and take it. This time, I stood up, gathered my papers, and headed for the door. "I'm going home now," I said over his shouting. Lisa, if you want to have a relationship with me that doesn't involve enabling thieves and tolerating disrespect, you know where to find me. Michael, when you're ready to have a conversation that starts with a genuine apology for how you've treated me, I'll consider listening. Until then, enjoy your $1 inheritance. I walked out of that house with my head high, and honey, I felt lighter than I had in years. Was it harsh? Maybe. Was it fair? Absolutely. The drive home gave me time to think about everything that had led to that moment. 35 years of working my fingers to the bone to give my children everything I never had. 35 years of putting their needs before my own, their happiness before mine, their future before my present. And for what? So my son could call me a useless old hag and his wife could steal my retirement money? But you know what the beautiful irony was? In trying to take advantage of what they saw as a weak old woman, they'd actually created something much more dangerous. A strong old woman who was completely done with their nonsense. I got home and made myself a cup of tea, sat in my favorite chair and called Mr. Williams to make sure all the legal documents were properly filed. "Dorothy," he said, chuckling, "I've been practicing law for 40 years, and that's the most satisfying will reading I've ever witnessed. How do you feel?" "Free," I told him. "For the first time in decades, I feel completely free." Of course, that wasn't the end of the drama. Over the next few weeks, I got dozens of phone calls, text messages, and emails from various family members trying to talk me out of my decision. Lisa called crying almost every day, begging me to reconsider, promising that Michael really was sorry and just needed time to process everything. Michael himself tried a few different approaches. First, he sent the kids over to guilt trip me, had Tyler ask me why I didn't love them anymore, had little Emma draw me pictures with messages about how sad Daddy was. When that didn't work, he tried anger, leaving voicemails calling me every name in the book and threatening to contest the will. Finally, he tried bargaining, offering to go to family counseling or do whatever it would take to fix our relationship. But honey, it was too little too late. You can't unring a bell, and you can't take back years of disrespect with a few desperate promises when the inheritance is on the line. The only person who seemed to understand my position was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd watched this whole drama unfold from across the street. She came over one evening with a casserole and some wisdom. "Dorothy," she said, settling into my kitchen chair, "I've been married 53 years and raised 4 children of my own. I've seen a lot of family drama in my time. And honey, what you did took more courage than most people ever manage in their whole lives." "You think I did the right thing?" I asked her, because honestly, there were moments when I wondered if I was being too harsh. "I think you did the only thing that made sense," she said. "Children need to learn that their parents aren't just ATM machines with unconditional love. They need to learn that respect and kindness matter, especially when it comes to family. You taught them a lesson they should have learned 30 years ago." Mrs. Patterson was right, of course, but the real validation came about 2 months later in the form of a letter from Tyler, my 16-year-old grandson. "Dear Grandma, I know Dad doesn't want me writing to you, but I needed to say some things. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I think I understand why you changed your will. Mom did steal from you, and Dad has been really mean to you for a long time. I remember him calling you names and treating you bad, and I remember thinking it was normal because that's just how he acted. But it's not normal, is it? When I think about how I would feel if someone talked to me the way Dad talks to you, it makes me sick. I'm sorry I was rude to you that day when this all started. I'm sorry I didn't stick up for you. And I'm sorry Dad taught me it was okay to treat people like that. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in this family realizes we were wrong." Y'all, I cried reading that letter. Happy tears, sad tears, proud tears, all mixed together, because it meant that something good had come out of all this mess. That boy had learned something important about respect and consequences and standing up for what's right. I wrote him back immediately, telling him that he was always welcome in my home, that my love for him had nothing to do with the problems I had with his parents, and that I was proud of him for having the courage to write to me. We've been corresponding regularly ever since, and he even comes to visit sometimes when Michael is at work. As for Michael and Sarah, they're still struggling financially, still dealing with the fallout from their choices. Sarah's criminal record makes it hard for her to find decent work, and Michael's had to take on extra shifts and side jobs to make ends meet. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they had to sell their house and move into a smaller rental across town. Part of me feels sad about that because it affects the grandchildren too, but mostly I feel like justice has been served. The hardest part of all this wasn't dealing with Michael's anger or Sarah's theft or even the legal proceedings. The hardest part was losing Lisa. My daughter, who I thought would understand why I had to take a stand, chose to cut me out of her life completely rather than admit that maybe, just maybe, her brother-in-law and sister-in-law were wrong. She sent me one final text message about 3 months after the will reading. "Mom, I can't have a relationship with someone who would destroy her own family over money. I hope you're happy with your decision, but I can't be part of it anymore." That text message broke something in me that I'm not sure will ever fully heal. But you know what, honey? I'm learning to live with it. I'm learning that sometimes standing up for yourself costs more than staying silent, but it's still worth doing. I'm learning that respect isn't something you can demand or buy or guilt people into giving you. It's something you have to require, even if that requirement comes with a price. These days, I keep busy with volunteer work at the animal shelter, helping at the children's home, and spending time with the few family members who've stuck by me through all this drama. My cousin Janet drives up from Murfreesboro every few weeks to check on me, and we have the best time going to lunch and catching up on family gossip. Tyler visits when he can, and we're slowly rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect instead of obligation and guilt. I've also made some new friends through my volunteer work. There's something beautiful about spending time with people who choose to be in your life because they enjoy your company, not because they feel like they have to tolerate you or because they want something from you. At 68 years old, I'm finally learning what healthy relationships feel like. The house feels different now, too. Quieter, yes, but also more peaceful. I'm not constantly waiting for the phone to ring with another crisis I'm expected to solve, another favor I'm expected to provide, another insult I'm expected to swallow. I can sit in my kitchen with my morning coffee and actually enjoy the silence instead of dreading what drama the day might bring. And honestly, sweetie, I sleep better now than I have in years. There's something to be said for living with integrity, even when that integrity costs you people you love. There's something to be said for looking in the mirror and seeing someone who refused to be a doormat, even when being a doormat would have been easier. About 6 months after the will reading, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Dr. Peterson, my longtime physician, stopping by to check on me after hearing about all the family drama through the medical community gossip network. "Dorothy," he said, settling into my living room with a cup of the coffee I'd offered him, I've been your doctor for 15 years, and I have to tell you, you seem healthier now than you've seemed in a long time. Your blood pressure's down, you're sleeping better, and you just seem lighter somehow. Well, Doc, I told him, it turns out that toxic family relationships are bad for your health. Who knew?
He laughed at that, but then got serious. I see a lot of elderly patients who sacrifice their own well-being to keep peace with adult children who don't appreciate them. They develop stress-related illnesses, depression, anxiety, all because they're afraid to set boundaries with people who should be taking care of them instead of taking advantage of them. What you did took incredible strength. It was nice to hear that from a medical professional, someone who'd seen the toll that family stress had been taking on my physical health over the years. It confirmed what I'd been feeling inside, that choosing self-respect over family harmony wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The anniversary of that awful Sunday when Michael called me a useless old hag came and went without any acknowledgement from him or Sarah. But I marked it in my own way by treating myself to a nice dinner at the Hermitage Hotel downtown and toasting to the woman I'd become over the past year. Stronger, wiser, more selective about who I allowed into my inner circle. I also used that anniversary as an opportunity to do something I'd been thinking about for months. I wrote a letter to myself to be opened on my 70th birthday, documenting this whole experience and the lessons I'd learned from it. I wanted to make sure that future Dorothy remember why she'd made these difficult choices, in case time softened the memories or in case anyone ever tried to convince me I'd been too harsh. The letter talked about the years of being taken for granted, the financial theft, the name-calling, the complete lack of respect for everything I'd sacrificed as a mother. But it also talked about the strength I found when I finally said enough. It talked about the peace that came with refusing to accept unacceptable behavior, even from people I loved. Winter came and went, and with it came some interesting developments. Through Tyler, I learned that Michael and Sarah were seeing a marriage counselor, trying to work through the stress and resentment that had built up between them. Apparently, having your wife go to prison for stealing from your mother put some strain on a relationship. Who could have predicted that? I also heard, again through Tyler, that Michael had been doing some soul searching about his relationship with me. The counselor had apparently asked him to think about patterns in his life, about how he treated people he considered beneath him or obligated to help him. Tyler said Michael had even admitted in therapy that he'd been unfair to me over the years. But admitting you were unfair in the safety of a therapist's office is very different from picking up the phone and apologizing to the person you wronged. And as the months passed without any direct contact from Michael, I realized that he was probably hoping I'd make the first move toward reconciliation, that I'd get lonely or guilty and reach out to him, making it easy for him to accept my overture without having to take full responsibility for his behavior. But honey, those days were over. I'd learned the hard way that people only treat you as badly as you allow them to treat you. And I was done allowing bad treatment from anyone, family or otherwise. Spring brought some unexpected news. Tyler called me one afternoon, excited and nervous at the same time. Grandma, I got accepted to Vanderbilt. I'm going to study pre-med just like you always said I should. And Grandma, I put you down as my emergency contact instead of Dad. I hope that's okay. Y'all, my heart just about burst with pride and joy. This young man, despite everything that had happened between our families, still saw me as someone he could count on, still valued my opinion, and wanted me to be part of his future. It felt like the greatest victory of this whole ordeal. Tyler,
I told him, my voice catching with pure excitement. "That's wonderful news. Of course it's okay to list me as your contact. I am so proud of you, sweetie. You're going to make an amazing doctor someday." We talked for over an hour about his plans, his classes, his dreams for the future. And not once did he mention his father's reaction to his college choice or to putting me as his emergency contact. That told me everything I needed to know about how things were going at home for that family. As Tyler's graduation from high school approached, I found myself in an interesting position. I wanted to be there for this milestone in my grandson's life, but I knew Michael and Sarah would be there too, and the restraining order was still in effect. Tyler solved the problem by asking if I'd take him out for a celebration dinner after the ceremony, just the two of us. "Grandma, the graduation ceremony is going to be all about everyone else anyway. I want to celebrate with the person who always believed in me, who always pushed me to do better, who always treated me like I mattered. That's you." So while Michael and Sarah sat through a long, boring graduation ceremony with hundreds of other families, Tyler and I had a quiet, meaningful dinner at his favorite restaurant. We talked about his future, about the mistakes his parents had made, about the importance of treating people with respect regardless of their age or their relationship to you. "Grandma," he said as we were finishing dessert, "I want you to know that what happened with Dad and Mom taught me something important. It taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about how you treat people. And it taught me that I never want to be the kind of person who takes advantage of someone just because they love me." That conversation confirmed something I suspected for a while, that the painful lesson I had taught my family hadn't been lost on everyone. At least one person had learned something valuable from watching the consequences of disrespect and dishonesty play out in real time. Summer brought some more changes. Lisa, surprisingly, reached out to me through a mutual friend. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet for coffee and talk. No demands, no ultimatums, just a conversation between a mother and daughter who'd lost their way. I agreed, mostly because I missed her, and partly because I was curious about what she wanted to say after almost a year of silence. We met at a little cafe in Green Hills, neutral territory, where neither of us would have the home field advantage. Lisa looked older, tired, like the stress of choosing sides in this family war had taken a toll on her too. "Mom," she said after we'd ordered our coffee, "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year about family, about loyalty, about right and wrong. And I think I might have been wrong about some things." I listened while she talked about how hard it had been to watch our family fall apart, how she tried to stay neutral at first but felt pressured to choose sides. She kept thinking that if she could get everyone to forgive and forget, we could go back to how things used to be. But Mom, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that how things used to be wasn't actually that great. Michael did treat you badly for years, and Sarah did steal from you, and I enabled both of those things by making excuses for them instead of calling them out. It was a start, honey. Not a complete apology, and not a complete acceptance of responsibility, but a start. We talked for 2 hours, and by the end, we'd agreed to try rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, with new boundaries and new expectations.
"I can't promise I'll never make mistakes again," Lisa told me as we were leaving. "But I can promise I'll try to be the kind of daughter who stands up for her mother instead of making excuses for people who hurt her." That was enough for me, at least as a beginning, because the truth is, I missed my daughter. I missed having someone to call when I needed to talk through a problem or share good news. I missed having family who actually wanted to spend time with me instead of just tolerating my presence. Fall came around again, marking a full year since this whole ordeal began.
Tyler started his freshman year at Vanderbilt, and I couldn't have been prouder. He called me regularly, stopped by for Sunday dinners when he could, and treated me like the respected family matriarch I'd always wanted to be. Lisa and I continued our slow reconciliation, meeting for coffee once a week and gradually rebuilding trust. She never pressured me to reconcile with Michael, never suggested I change my will back, never made excuses for behavior she'd come to recognize as unacceptable. As for Michael and Sarah, they faded into the background of my life. I heard updates occasionally through Tyler or Lisa, but they became more like distant relatives I barely knew rather than immediate family members I worried about constantly. Michael never did call to apologize, never acknowledged that maybe calling his mother a useless old hag had been out of line. Sarah completed her probation without incident and found a job at a call center, working evenings and weekends to help make ends meet. The restraining order expired after 2 years, but I didn't renew it because it wasn't necessary anymore. Sarah seemed genuinely committed to staying out of my life, which was exactly what I wanted. On my 70th birthday, I opened that letter I'd written to myself 2 years earlier. Reading it brought back all the emotions of that difficult period, the hurt, the anger, the determination, the fear. But it also reminded me of how far I'd come and how much stronger I'd become. The letter ended with these words: "Dorothy, I hope when you read this, you're still standing up for yourself. I hope you're still refusing to accept unacceptable behavior from anyone, no matter how much you love them. I hope you remembered that respect isn't optional, it's required. And I hope you're proud of the woman you became when you finally said, 'Enough.'" Y'all, I was proud. Proud of choosing self-respect over family harmony. Proud of teaching my family that actions have consequences. Proud of showing my grandson what it looks like to stand up for yourself even when it's hard. But you know what I was most proud of? I was proud that when push came to shove, when I had to choose between being a doormat and being alone, I chose being alone because it turned out I wasn't really alone at all. I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, respected me, and wanted to be in my life for the right reasons. The money from Sarah's restitution payments eventually added up to most of what she'd stolen from me. I donated every penny of it to the same 3 charities mentioned in my will: the Humane Society, the Children's Home, and the Alzheimer's Association. It seemed fitting that money stolen out of greed should be transformed into something that helped others. I never changed my will back. Why would I? Michael never apologized, never acknowledged his wrongdoing, never showed any sign that he understood why I'd made the changes in the first place. The charities I'd chosen would make much better use of my life's work than children who saw me as nothing more than a wallet with a pulse. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my decision, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is always no. Could I have been less dramatic about it? Maybe. Could I have given them more chances to make things right? Probably. But would any of that have actually changed their fundamental lack of respect for me? I doubt it. What I did sent a clear message that resonated far beyond my own family. Other elderly friends started telling me stories about their own ungrateful adult children, and several of them made changes to their own wills after hearing about mine. Mrs. Patterson across the street started standing up to her son when he demanded money. My neighbor 2 houses down stopped babysitting for free every weekend when her daughter started treating her like hired help. It's funny how one person's refusal to be a doormat can give other people permission to stop being doormats too. These days, at 72 years old, I live exactly the life I want to live. I volunteer where I want to volunteer, travel when I want to travel, and spend my time with people who genuinely enjoy my company. I have Tyler and Lisa back in my life. I have good friends who respect me, and I have the satisfaction of knowing I stood up for myself when it mattered most. Do I miss Michael? Of course I do. He's still my son, and there's still a part of me that hopes someday he'll grow up enough to understand what went wrong between us. Do I regret losing those years with my other grandchildren? Absolutely. But I don't regret the choice I made, because the alternative was continuing to live as a victim in my own family. The truth is, honey, respect isn't something you can beg for or buy or manipulate people into giving you. Respect is something you require, and if people can't meet that requirement, then they don't deserve access to your time, your energy, or your resources. Michael called me a useless old hag. And maybe in his eyes, that's what I was. But this useless old hag was smart enough to recognize her worth, strong enough to demand better treatment, and wise enough to know when to walk away. This useless old hag built a life filled with people who actually wanted her in it, instead of people who just tolerated her presence. And you know what? This useless old hag is going to leave behind a legacy of standing up for herself, of refusing to accept unacceptable behavior, and of teaching her family that love without respect isn't really love. And when that lawyer read my will, honey, they learned that this useless old hag still had some surprises left in her. And sweetie, that's a lesson none of them will ever forget. The end came exactly as I'd planned it, not with my death, but with my rebirth as a woman who finally understood her worth. And y'all, that's the most beautiful revenge of all.